Hi, I'm Sam Farmer. Welcome to the All 32, the LA Times streaming mock draft. Now let's get to the first three picks. I want to introduce Tyler Dragon, the Cincinnati Enquirer, covers the Bengals. Les Carpenter covers the Redskins for the Washington Post. And Dave Burkett, who covers the Lions for the Detroit Free Press. Why don't we start with you, Tyler? Cincinnati Bengals have the first pick. Who are they taking? This is a big mystery here.
The worst kept secret. I've pretty much said since November, December that the Bengals were taking Joe Burrow, and that is not going to change. They are definitely taking him with the number one overall pick. He's been number one on their draft board for a while. He grew up about 2 hours and 15 minutes from Paul Brown Stadium. His girlfriend lives in Cincinnati. So it was pretty much a perfect match. And when they were down there at the NFL Combine, they met with him for 18 minutes, and it pretty much reaffirmed everything they thought about him.
Was it a relief to the Bengals when he came out at the Combine and said, I just want to play football, and dismissed the talk that he might not sign with the Bengals?
You know, quietly, it probably was a relief. They would not say that publicly because they always believed that that was just media gossip from national media, and they never really heard that coming out of Joe Burrow's camp.
Now that Tyler's thrown us a curveball, Les, you're going to have to rework your whole draft board, but who do the Washington Redskins take it to?
They're taking Chase Young, I think. It's I'd say right now the only mystery in this might be I think they are open to a really, really good offer to trade, but I think it would have to be a really, really, really good offer. I'm not even sure the things that are talked about now, say the Miami Dolphins trading 2 first-round picks for this year, and I just really don't see any other way than they take Chase Young. He just fits so much of what Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio want to do with this defense, and to have a great pass rusher, or presumably a great pass rusher for years to come in the NFC East, chasing those quarterbacks around. I just think that that's the way they're going to go with this.
Do they like him like the Niners like Nick Bosa? Is he as versatile as Nick Bosa?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that much about his versatility. Everything I've seen of the tape seems like he can do so many different things. It seems like he's got most of the rush maneuvers and moves down. I would see right now that they think he's someone they can plug right in. They like a lot of depth up front too, and that's really their strength right now. When you look at their roster, is so many good players. They're going to go from a 3-4 to a 4-3, and they have all these defensive tackles that they really like, good young players. And then they still have at least another year of Ryan Kerrigan. They have Montez Sweat they took last year in the draft as outside rushers. And you add him in there, and I think they can just feel they can rotate these guys in and out, keep them all fresh, and just kind of keep that surge going. You can talk a lot about wanting a surge up front and keep moving forward.
How about you, Dave? Detroit Lions at 3.
Look, I think the Lions, if you can get the Miami and LA Chargers GMs on the horn right now, that's what they most like to do. But absent a trade, I think they go with Jeff Okudah, Ohio State cornerback. So it's Buckeyes back-to-back in this draft. I've given Okudah to the Lions in every mock draft I've done so far, and the Lions probably need pass rush more than anything, so they could use a guy like Chase Young if a team were to trade up to number 2. I think they would run to the board with that. But absent that, I don't think Tua fits what they want to do or the need to win now for Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. There are 3 good defensive players still left on the board, and Derek Brown, Isaiah Simmons, and Jeff Okudah. But cornerback is a big position of need. You look at how the Patriots have won defensively and what they've done. I think the Lions are trying to do the exact same thing.
At what point are they going to start looking at quarterbacks? Matt Stafford's a really, really good quarterback and in the right situation. But you mentioned Tua. Is that at all a consideration? Quarterback.
Well, I think it's something that they have to consider. They have to do their homework on Tua because, look, Stafford is 32 years old. He's played 11 seasons. He still has 3 years left on his deal. He played at a very high level last year, so it's not like they're in a situation like the Bengals, for instance, where they need that signal caller of the future. But you look at how teams build in the NFL and how they win in the NFL now, and that's with a young quarterback and a cheap young quarterback, and maybe you bolster the rest of the roster. And so I think it's something in with a team like the Lions, who think they're a little bit closer than maybe their record appears, you have a chance to perhaps get, if your scouting reports and if the medicals check out into a player that, 6 months ago was thought of as being one of the better quarterbacks we've seen in college football the last decade. So the Lions certainly have to kick the tires on that, make sure that's not what they want to do to set this franchise up for the future. But again, coming off a 3-12-1 season with the need to win now, the mandate given down by ownership late last year, I just don't think that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia have that time frame in them. I think they need to get somebody who can impact the team more in 2020 than Tua Wood, who would presumably take a redshirt here this fall.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, guys. That's picks 1, 2, and 3. The only other time the Bengals selected a quarterback number 1 overall was 2003 when they took Carson Palmer. So thanks so much for joining me, Carson.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Always good to catch up. Yeah.
If Joe Burrow does go, which is no surprise, it's been months they've been talking about Joe Burrow going to the Bengals, what will he encounter? What do you see there?
Division's the first thing that jumps out at me. Being a young quarterback, you always want to go into a struggling division, not probably the best division in the AFC. So that's going to be an uphill battle, no doubt. I mean, you got Baltimore, who phenomenal organization. They're good with no matter who is at quarterback and really have proven that over the last 2 decades. And then you got Pittsburgh, who Pittsburgh's always good regardless. And they draft well, very well run organization. Cleveland's the wild card as far as a roster is concerned. Cleveland might, in that division, Cleveland might have the best roster top to bottom. It's an uphill battle to get to the playoffs because you got to play well in your division, as you know, to get to the playoffs.
What are the pressures facing a number 1 overall pick, the expectations, the difficulties, maybe some of the unseen difficulties of being in that position?
The quarterbacks that make it look forward to that pressure. The quarterbacks that fizzle out and don't play well worry about it. I don't know Joe very well. I think from everything I've read and heard, he seems like the guy that really looks forward to that pressure and anticipates that pressure. And, feeling that weight of an organization on your back, you either get scared and you crumble, or you thrive in it and you enjoy it. And I know looking back now, that's the one thing I miss is just constantly from my playing days, you're constantly to face the franchise. You constantly have a $1 billion organization, that has a high expectations and a massive fan base that, Bengal fans are die hard. They're there every week, year in, year out. Good. Some of the good years, they've had a couple good years. They have a lot of bad years, and you have just such a passionate fan base. Joe's got a whole nother caveat too, is he's a hometown kid. I mean, he's an Ohio kid. So that fan base pressure is even greater and the expectations are even greater. He's one of their own.
I have 4 great reporters here, NFL writers. We've got Tom Rock from Newsday, who will be picking for the Giants. Omar Kelly from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, who will be picking for the Dolphins. Our own Jeff Miller from the LA Times picking for the Chargers, and Joe Person from the Athletic in Charlotte picking for the Carolina Panthers. So, Tom, let's start with you. What do you like the Giants doing it for?
Well, I like them taking all of their time to make this pick because we're going to wait and see who wants to come up and grab Tua before Omar does. It's going to be...
It's going to be a stare down.
It's going to be there's going to be about 2 seconds left on the clock when the Giants put this pick in, and eventually they're going to look around. They're going to say we have a lot of holes to fill. They're going to say we need a player who can fill multiple holes, and they're going to take Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson. They need to find somebody who can put pressure on the quarterback, and I think with Simmons, listen, they would have liked to have gotten Chase Young. Obviously, that would have answered that question, but with Simmons, you have a guy who can not only make plays from the sideline to sideline, but from goal line to goal line. In the athletic and versatile world of the NFL these days, the more you can do, the more value you have. And for the number 4 pick, that's a pretty good value right there with Isaiah Simmons.
Now, Omar, assuming no one does trade into that spot at 4, which way are the Dolphins going to go?
Well, everybody knows that the Dolphins are committed to selecting quarterback in the first round. I don't think that they have an absolute conviction on which quarterback that's going to be, primarily because you can't really get a hand on to a Tagovailoa and his medicals. But I think that They tanked this entire. Well, let's correct that. They have rebuilt this season with the intention of getting a young quarterback that they can develop. You don't do that for a defensive tackle. You don't do that for an offensive lineman, especially after you trade an offensive lineman. And so I do believe that they're going to make the selection of Tua Tagovailoa if he's there at 5. I do not feel like they're going to trade up to secure him just because there's so much risk associated with it. I think they would be comfortable with selecting Justin Herbert or Jordan Love if Tua is taken ahead of them. Right now, with the number 5 pick, since he's there, I think they're going to invest in Tua.
Is there one who works better for what they want to do offensively, Herbert or Love?
If you just look at the Chan Gailey model of terms of quarterbacks that he wants to develop and he wants to work with, he needs athleticism. So I think that Jordan Love, and based on what I'm told, Jordan Love fits more of the mold of what he wants. And then, to me, based on this is still the same GM that coached Ryan Tannehill and knows Ryan Tannehill and knows that he lacks that alpha male trait, I have a hard time believing that they would go with a quarterback like a Herbert who does not have that alpha male trait and do that all over again. So I think that Joe Herbert, I think a lot of the talk about the Dolphins and Joe Herbert is more of a smokescreen than reality.
Huh, okay. Jeff Miller, now Tua is off the board. Which way do the Chargers go? Are they going to go quarterback or left tackle?
I think they're committed to taking a quarterback, sort of just like Omar said with the Dolphins, same kind of scenario. And since Omar, we got greedy and took Tua, I think the Chargers, because I think the Chargers would love for Tua to be there. And I sitting here right now today, I think Justin Herbert would be the Chargers' choice. Having said that, for all the reasons Omar just enumerated, I mean, I think they like Jordan Love too. But I think they would take Justin Herbert, the way they played last year and the turnovers that Love had at Utah State, I think would be concerning. That's what, Anthony Lynn, the head coach, he preaches don't turn the ball over, which I think is why he's very comfortable with Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback. So I think because of just based on that and nothing else, I would say they would take Herbert.
Would they keep Tyrod as the starter for a year? Would they start a Herbert right away and just start the new era?
I think the idea would be to have Tyrod start the season, see how it goes. And I mean, these guys are trying to win. They're going to do, hopefully going into the new stadium if it's able to be completed on time. And they need to win. GM needs to win. Tom Telesco, Anthony Lynn needs to win. They were 5-11 last year. So I think they're going to go into this with the idea of Tyrod Taylor will give them the best chance to win starting the season, and they'll see how it goes from there.
All right, Joe, what are the Panthers going to do?
Can you guys hear me okay?
You're breaking up a little bit. Hold it up. Derek Brown. Now give us a reason why you're picking Derek Brown.
Panthers have a lot of holes on defense. So Derek Brown makes a lot of sense. Very athletic playmaker, as you guys know from the SEC. Every time I turned an Auburn game on this fall, he was just making plays. He looked like a man amongst boys playing in the SEC. So Derek Brown, defensive tackle, is the choice for the Panthers.
Okay, so we're through pick 7, and I've got my LA Times colleagues here, Jeff Miller, who covers the Chargers, and Bill Plaschke, National Columnist of the Year for the 8th time, I believe. And
who's in track?
Let's as you can see, my backdrop's a little different.
Oh, Sam, you got some books up behind you. All right, what's the over-under on how many of those books you've actually opened?
I've opened one. I actually wrote this book, and you can find it in the bargain basement, bottom of a bin at a B. Dalton, if those exist anymore. But
yeah. There's quite a bit of dust on those books in the binding.
All this took was a little cleaning out of the cobwebs, and so anyway, we're looking at the first 7 picks. 3 quarterbacks went in the first 6 picks, and Jeff took Justin Herbert. Let's drill down a little bit on that decision of the Chargers.
Yeah, I think at this point they're committed to developing a quarterback. This is a transition year a little bit for the Chargers, and they once they decided to move on from Phillip Rivers, it became pretty obvious that they were this was the path they were going to take.
Bill, is Justin Herbert going to sell those tickets they need to sell?
No, you know what? I disagree with the prediction. I guess you can disagree with the prediction. My prediction would be the Dolphins they can't take a chance. They can't take a chance on Tua's health. They need a guy for sure. I think the Dolphins take Herbert, and I think Tua falls to the Chargers because the Chargers can take that chance. They have to take that. You know, the guy's had, 5 or 6 surgeries. We have no idea how he is. They only see him on film. It's a big risk pick. I think the Dolphins don't really need to make that risk. I think the Chargers do.
But what you say about Tua is particularly interesting now because teams not able to bring players in for visits and the 30 visits canceled, as well as not being able to examine these players. It's layering risk on top of risk, particularly for a franchise like the Chargers. It's been kind of snake bit. I mean, they've had lots of injuries. You know, you think about from recently, the Forrest Lamps and the Hunter Henrys and guys taken early in the draft or took a long time to get on the field, Mike Williams, and then to do that with Tua and that hip injury seems really dicey, especially when you can't look. But somebody's going to fall in love with this guy.
You agree, Jeff? If he's there, Jeff, you agree the Chargers got to take him?
I think the Chargers would love for him to be there.
Sam, one of the first picks I'd also disagree with, they have the Giants. Who do you have? You have Simmons going to the Giants?
Yes.
I think they need protection for Daniel Jones. Like this big kid from Iowa, Tristan Wirtz. It's all about the quarterback. This whole league is about the quarterback. The whole draft, everything the NFL does is about the quarterback.
The Chargers are in a good spot, too, in terms of the stadium. I mean, especially in these turbulent economic times and with the thoughts that the stadium might not be completed, the people who are staying up nights are the people who took on the full risk and weight of this stadium, which is by far the most expensive stadium in history. There's got to be a lot of stress about, even if you have a compelling team, can you get people to sit shoulder to shoulder, especially without a vaccine?
Could you imagine that stadium opening and no fans being in it? I mean, imagine the oddity of that. I mean, I don't think there's any way that's going to happen.
If sports comes back, it's going to be without fans for the rest of the year.
What would have to happen for people to come in? There'd have to be a vaccine.
And that's not happening until at least the winter.
I think it's going to be just an absolutely dystopian, bizarre science fiction type season.
But we're still having a draft. We're still doing the NFL draft. Woo!
Draft rolls on, and we're heading to picks 8 through 10. So thank you so much, guys. We have Kent Summers from the Arizona Republic picking for the Cardinals. John Reed of the Florida Times-Union picking for Jacksonville. And Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland Plain Dealer picking for the Browns. So let's start with you, Kent.
Quarterback Kyler Murray has lobbied a little bit for his college teammate CeeDee Lamb. A receiver would be really tempting here, but I think the Cardinals will address their offensive line situation, and with all the tackles still available, they'll have their choice here. I don't know who they have ranked first, but a gut feeling said they go with Tristan Wirfs, a tackle from Iowa, just because of the history of Iowa putting out tackles, and they can plug a tackle in on the right side right away and really protect Kyler Murray for the upcoming season.
Of this draft class of tackles, that's the true right tackle.
Right, and they signed left tackle DJ Humphries to a 3-year deal, before free agency started, so they've got that position locked up. Wirfs could, like I said, plug right in on the right side and be a starter from day one.
Interested what you say about CeeDee Lamb, and that receiver would still be a possibility there with DeAndre Hopkins being signed. You think they could still add another receiver?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, given, Cliff Kingsbury's offense, Larry Fitzgerald's got to quit playing sometime, right? I mean, it's been a year-to-year proposition for the last 4 years. So they could look ahead a little bit.
We have the Cardinals taking an offensive tackle. Which way do the Jaguars go?
Well, I'm officially substituting for Dave Caldwell, and I hope to make a better pick than he will. This team has so many holes to fill, but I think they have to go out and get a playmaker. And I think Jerry Jeudy is that guy. And he showed out in the combine with 4.240, and they need a guy who can, put on the other side of the receiver there and a speed guy with DJ Chark, and I think he checks all the boxes, and that's a pick that Caldwell probably won't make, but.
Which way do you think Caldwell will go? Will he be thinking more defense or?
I think defensive tackle. I mean, they addressed with some veterans in the in free agency, and Brown, I'm sure he's not on your board, but I think they probably would look that way and then probably try to get a speed receiver in probably like the second or third round, since it's so deep in that position. And I also wouldn't be surprised if they try to trade up. I mean, I've seen mock drafts talking about quarterback. So this franchise right now is in a flux, and who knows what might happen on the 23rd.
Mary Kay, Cleveland at 10.
Well, first of all, I apologize. I have to work on my sports background game. I look like I'm ready for afternoon tea here instead of making a pick in a mock draft. So I apologize for that. That will be changing sometime soon. As for the
you got to get a bunch of books behind you that you haven't read.
Exactly. I have to go scrounge everything up that I can find around the house and really get this thing rolling here. So at number 10, there are still some really good offensive tackles available. That's really what the Browns need. They need a left tackle. They got their right tackle in free agency in Jack Conklin. They are set there. So right now, as I look at this board, I'm going to go with Andrew Thomas out of Georgia. One of the number one reasons I'm putting him here right now is because he has experience at left tackle. Some of the other guys that are so good at tackle in this draft, including a Jedrick Wills out of Alabama, primarily are right tackles. And I do think that there is a transition to be made. So I'm going Andrew Thomas of Georgia here.
Any other areas we should be thinking about with the Browns?
Well, with this number 10 pick, I really don't think that Isaiah Simmons will last anywhere close to getting to the Browns at number 10. But there is one scenario in which I could see them being interested in him, and that would be if they traded for Trent Williams. Then maybe they could work some kind of a deal if they had to trade up a little bit for an Isaiah Simmons, or perhaps maybe he even falls there. I saw a mock draft yesterday where he fell all the way to number 10. So that's another name to watch.
We are moving on to picks 11 through 13. I've got Brian Costello making the pick for the Jets. Brian's from the New York Post. For the Raiders at 12, we've got Vinny Bonsignor, who is a writer for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and Matt Barrows from The Athletic making the pick at 13 for the 49ers. So let's go to you first. Brian, who do you like, and who's a fit for the Jets here at 11? He's frozen solid.
I think I'm on freezing.
Okay.
Did you throw it to me? It was frozen.
Welcome to every NFL draft room right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got to ask you about the grocery store behind you, what that is.
Yeah. This is my daughter Alexa's grocery store here. She's 7. She's also out of toilet paper like every other grocery store in America right now. So
Brian, who did the Jets take at 11?
The Jets take at 11, Louisville tackle, Mekhi Becton. They desperately need to address the offensive line. They did a few bargain basement type moves on the offensive line in free agency, but they need to protect Sam Darnold, make that line better, maybe open some holes for Le'Veon Bell this year. So they take the 6'7", 364-pounder out of Louisville to kind of secure their line.
I think Becton, he's maybe physically the biggest guy in this draft. Where do you see him plugging in right away?
I think they want a left tackle. They signed George Fant from the Seahawks. He's currently their left tackle, but he was a kind of a part-time starter in Seattle. So if they do that, they can move Fant to right tackle, and he can compete with Chuma Edoga over there, who they drafted last year.
Great. How about you, Vinny?
Well, with that pick, they're celebrating because they wanted a wide receiver, and they were worried the Jets might that their two top targets, Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb, would be gone, especially after the Jets pick. So they're running to the podium or wherever they got to do and emailing their pick, whatever they have to do. And it's going to be CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver from Oklahoma. They desperately need a wide receiver one. They thought they had that in Antonio Brown last year. We all know how that worked out. It left a gaping hole at that position. They haven't been able to fill it. They've avoided, going down any dangerous roads during free agency, trying to chase that position, knowing that they were going to have their guy in the draft. And CeeDee Lamb, he brings explosiveness, playmaking, everything that they didn't have at that position last year.
Is there any possibility with Jordan Love still on the board that they might think quarterback here?
I don't think that they would think it at 12. There's a possibility that they may get aggressive and try to trade up. There's continuing appreciation that you could feel for Justin Herbert. I think that that's a guy that they would trade up for. I don't think that they would take Love at number 12. But with that 19th pick, and they're sitting back there 7 more picks away, that could be a possibility. They could also trade back, thinking that maybe Love would be available further down, maybe pick up a second-round pick as a result.
And Matt Barrows, NFC champion 49ers, what do they need? And this is obviously a great spot for them to be picking.
Yeah, I think if it fell this way, they'd be disappointed that CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy are off the board. But I think they'd be looking at Jedrick Wills, the tackle from Alabama, Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle from South Carolina, and then Henry Ruggs, the burner from Alabama. And it's a good conundrum to have, I think, for them. I think in that instance, they would go with the defensive tackle. I think they'd go with Kinlaw, somebody who could step in and replace DeForest Buckner at that defensive tackle position. He's a bit more raw than Buckner was coming out of Oregon. And the other rationale is that, this is a deep draft for wide receivers, and they've got the 31st pick, and maybe they wait until that pick or some other spot to take that wide receiver.
You mentioned tackle, offensive tackle. How long is Joe Staley going to be around, and do they have to start thinking about rebuilding there on the offensive line again?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Wills could be a possibility because of that reason. Joe Staley hasn't said, he's still under contract for 2 more seasons. He played well last year. There's no real reason for him to retire, but he hasn't come out and said, yeah, I'm coming back for the 2020 season yet. And that's sort of been hanging in the air a bit as a question mark. And I think Wills is interesting because of all those early round tackles, he seems to be the guy that could play guard for a little while. Mm-hmm. And maybe he moonlights at guard for a season or two while Staley's still playing, and then kicks out to right tackle. Mike McGlinchey slides to left tackle. That would be a really interesting solution.
This draft is loaded with wide receivers. Probably 1/4 of the top 100 players in this draft are wide receivers. Why don't they take Jordan Love with this pick, make the big splash, roll the big dice, take Jordan Love?
Why they wouldn't do it at 12 is I think that they think that he would still be there at 19 and maybe even further down if they wanted to trade back a few spots.
You can't wait on quarterbacks. I
agree.
How serious did talks get with Tom Brady? Did that go anywhere?
I think when you're talking about Tom Brady, you have to be involved, but it just didn't fit for various reasons. Like, they don't need to sell any tickets. They're sold out, beyond sold out. They exceeded expectations.
Vinny, you're an LA guy. You covered the Rams. You covered the Chargers in the early years in LA.
I miss you guys.
Yeah, we do miss you, Vinny. And
Sam's never said that before, but I say it all the time.
Thank you, Bill.
True. I love Vinny. You were here for the Rams coming back, for the Chargers coming up here, sort of had your finger on the pulse of LA and how they were received. How's it different in Las Vegas with the Raiders? What are you seeing around Las Vegas that would indicate to you that people are really excited?
I think everybody's definitely all in the community, and there's way more of this community than just Las Vegas. We think of Las Vegas, in the Strip and everything like that, but now living here for a couple of months, Henderson, Summerlin, there's growing, areas in and around Las Vegas. It's one of the fastest growing cities, in the country. So the excitement is here. And I look back and Sam, how many meetings were we at in New York or wherever talking this thing through?
Constant.
LA to Vegas is going to be off the charts.
Yes, exactly. And then I've talked to Mark Davis about this. How about the 15 freeway, on a Monday morning? You don't want to be involved in that.
And you don't want to break down on that freeway.
Yes, exactly.
Because whoever wants to help you ain't there to help you.
Right. No doubt about it.
We're on to picks 14 through 16 in the LA Times beat writer mock draft. Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times, Nikki Javala from the Athletic in Denver, and Jeff Schultz from the Athletic in Atlanta. So let's start with you, Rick. Who do you like the Buccaneers taking at 14?
Well, I think the Bucs, we're going to have to get a right tackle anyway. But with Tom Brady, it's even more paramount. Obviously, he's a guy that's going to stand in the pocket. So based on this mock, they're going to take Jedrick Wills Jr., Alabama, and he is a right tackle. These guys played there since his sophomore year. Fits the mold. I mean, he's 6'5", 320. There's about 5 tackles in this draft I think the Bucs would be happy with. I think 3 of them are off the board at this point. So they get the right tackle, and they still have to come back and get a 3-down running back probably in the second round. They have some needs on defense as well.
How would you compare the Brady phenomenon, the Brady excitement, to John Gruden at his height of the Chucky stuff?
I've never seen anything like this Tom Brady deal. I really haven't, Sam. I mean, when you consider, first of all, that he left the Patriots, right? That was a big enough of a surprise after 20 seasons. Some people thought he would, some didn't know for sure. But to come to Tampa Bay, where they have a career, or franchise 387 winning percentage, and haven't been in the playoffs in 12 years, he's been to 11 straight. It's so antithetical, right, that he would do it. But then you look at the personnel they have, and it makes sense, right, with all the stuff they have on offense. And I think, I think that, having Bruce Arians here, a guy that's had great quarterbacks, Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks, Hollywood type quarterbacks, I think that helps, right? So, but I've never seen anything, the amount of attention, the fan excitement, all of that, of course. And I mean, it's surreal in some respects.
And Nikki, the Broncos got their quarterback last year, it looks like. Who do you think they'll take here?
I'm going with Henry Ruggs here. They have a glaring need for a receiver, and I think his speed is a nice complement to Courtland Sutton's size. And they've made a lot of investments on both sides of the ball. A lot of their money currently is tied to defense because they have more veteran players with bigger contracts. But, they've really invested in the offensive line. They brought in Melvin Gordon to boost the run game. They really like Drew Lock, and I think with the coordinator they brought in, and Pat Shurmur is a coordinator whose scheme is geared toward Drew Lock's strengths.
Are there any other areas you think they might go? Might they look at interior offensive line, tackle?
I could see them taking a tackle if there's somebody they like. Garrett Bowles is in the last year of his deal. They haven't decided on his 5th year, but I can't see any scenario where they pick that up. They'll decide after the draft, but that's going to be close to $11 million fully guaranteed immediately. So I don't see that happening. So they're going to be in the left tackle market. If not immediately, then certainly next week. And if you wait too long, your options are limited.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jeff. The Falcons have their running game locked down now that they have Todd Gurley. Do they even need blockers at this point?
Yeah, this is a franchise that's had some offensive line problems here in the last few years, but they've kind of had problems everywhere. But they've actually signed and drafted quite a few offensive linemen in the last couple of years. So I would be surprised, honestly, if they drafted one. I think their biggest needs really, Sam, are kind of at all 3 layers on the defense. I could actually see them drafting a running back, believe it or not, but not with one of the first 2 picks. You don't really know what you're getting with Todd Gurley, and behind him, they're just kind of a bunch of guys. So again, I think they could go defensive back, defensive line, or linebacker. But I'm going to go with Clayvon. I don't even know how you say it. Chason, the edge rusher from LSU. The Vic Beasley thing, that experiment's finally over. He had one really good year, and that was pretty much it. They don't really know what they still have with Tack McKinley. They're pretty thin on the defensive line. I could see them going either with an edge rusher or an interior guy to put next to Grady Jarrett. But given what's on the board right now, he'd be the guy I would go with. A guy with a lot of speed, not great size, but Dan Quinn kind of likes those attacking type defensive linemen.
Yeah, and that brings it full circle because it's somebody who can get after Tom Brady.
Yeah, well, they've got Tom Brady, they got Drew Brees. This is not a great this is not a great division to play defense in right now.
Yeah. Clarence Hill from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram is going to make the pick for the Dallas Cowboys.
This is Jerry Jones picking for the Dallas Cowboys, and with the 17th, the 17th pick, it just felt right. It felt right for the Cowboys. C.J. Anderson, cornerback, Florida, a dream pick for the Cowboys. As the draft unfolded, the biggest need for the Cowboys is the cornerback. They lost Byron Jones to the Dolphins. You look at what they've done in free agency, they really haven't replaced that position for number one corner. C.J. Henderson, second best corner in the draft. Next best defensive player that fits their needs right there at 7.
Clarence is the only guy in this group of selectors who is picking for the first time. Each of the other three of you have picked. So Omar, this would be your second pick after having picked Tua at the 5 spot.
Surprise.
Who do you like for the Dolphins?
This is really a situation where most of the offensive tackles that I really coveted were gone, which puts me into a tough bind. Do I take my 5th offensive tackle, or do I take an edge setter that can really help my defense in terms of setting the edge? I am going to stick to my board and select the highest rated player on my board, which happens to be center Cesar Ruiz.
Not a lot of interior offensive linemen in this first round, at least projected to go. What do you think they'll be looking at for the 3rd pick of the first round?
Then we definitely are in a desperate spot for tackle. I've just put the team in a desperate spot for tackle, but I don't want to select an inferior tackle. I know I can really pick an elite center.
Well, let's go to Vinny Bonsignor for the Raiders. Now their 2nd pick after taking CeeDee Lamb, right?
Yeah, and kind of think they're going to trade out of this position, maybe drop down to 25, 26, try to pick up a 2nd round pick. As a result, that's what I think might happen on draft night. But without trades here, I'm going to go with A.J. Terrell, the cornerback from Clemson. Mike Mayock and John Gruden have shown an affinity for Clemson players. Last year, Cleveland Farrell, Trayvon Mullen, Hunter Renfrow, the wide receiver. They took 3 players from Clemson. They seem to like that.
Taking a corner, which is sort of the Raiders' way, and they've been very hit and miss in the corners they've taken in recent years.
Safety is a big need. There's no question about it. But it kind of flipped on them within the last week or so. They thought they had Eli Apple. They signed him as a free agent or agreed to terms with him as a free agent. But there was some difficulties with the physical. Not quite sure exactly what that was all about. But that deal fell through. They brought in Demarius Randall, the safety, who can also play cornerback, but more of a safety at this point in his career for the Cleveland Browns. So they lost the cornerback. They filled the safety hole, so as a result, I think they'll swing back to cornerback if they keep the 19th pick.
And John, I think you took the first receiver in this receiver-rich draft with Jerry Jeudy at 9.
Yes, sir.
Who do you like the Jaguars taking at 20? Are we at 20?
Well, I would like to get on the phone with Dallas to get that pick back there. We like C.J. Henderson. I'm going to be Dave Caldwell, and we're going to do a better job. So we're going to stick with our needs, and our needs is a cornerback. We traded off A.J. Bouye to Denver for a 4th round pick. And obviously we traded Jalen Ramsey last October. We got to go with a need. So we'll go with Christian Fulton from LSU. Big reason why we like him is because that speed, he's not a speed burner like CJ, but 4.6 and a 40, we feel he can be an outside corner. And we think we can build that potential from what we don't have at that spot. We're going to pull the trigger and get Fulton. And we think he can be a good player.
Excellent. Okay, so we're into the 20s in the LA Times beat writer mock draft, and we'll go to Les Bowen making the pick for the Eagles. Les is from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
I would have liked one of those 3 receivers that's already been taken, but since I'm not going to get one, I'll take another receiver. I'll take Justin Jefferson from LSU. I think most people consider him the 4th receiver in the draft. There's a little bit of concern that he's more of a slot guy than an outside guy. I think that's maybe a little over-analyzed. The Eagles are in a horrific situation at wide receiver. At least they were last season. I mean, it's possible Deshaun Jackson could have some kind of miracle comeback year at age 33, but I think it would be better to draft Justin Jefferson.
The Eagles have been sort of hit and miss on receivers in the first round.
Or miss. They took J.J. Arcega-Whiteside last year in the 2nd round from Stanford. He had a horrendous rookie season. Looked like a guy who just could not play, which was not what he was billed to be coming out of Stanford. I think get a really good wide receiver and kind of go from there. You can fill those other needs. You have 7 other picks. I'm not, don't outsmart yourself, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. Well, great. We'll go to Ben Gessling, Minneapolis Star Tribune, making 2 picks in this cycle, but Who do the Vikings take at 22?
They need offensive line help, which is a common theme for the Vikings. They took Garrett Bradbury in the first round last year, but if they can find a tackle here, I think it makes a lot of sense for them. So Josh Jones, the tackle from Houston, is the pick here at 22. Question about whether he could start in year one. I think he's seen as being raw. It would not be a situation where the Vikings would have to start him right away if they keep Riley Reif on the roster. They've talked about moving Reif to guard. They could potentially move on from Reif, save some cap room that way if they felt Jones was ready to go. But with a potentially truncated offseason, that could be a difficult timetable to get him ready to go that soon.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with the truncated offseason, because I think that's going to be an issue for a lot of teams at a lot of positions. We'll circle back with you. Now Ben Volen, Boston Globe, with the Patriots a little earlier than we are used to seeing the Patriots.
Yeah, 23rd pick is earlier than usual for them, although actually this is the second straight year they do have that pick. Last year they got the Rams 23rd pick for Brandon Cooks. But the draft in general is just very unusual for the Patriots. A, because they need a quarterback for the first time in 20 years, and B, they need everybody. They need positions up and down the roster. Pretty sure that they're going to be rebuilding for the next couple of years. Doesn't mean they're going to be tanking or anything of that nature, but they had the NFL's oldest roster by a large margin last year. A lot of veteran players who are starting to get on the wrong side of 30, and it's not just Tom Brady. So they just need youth across the board. So if they stick at 23, which I'm not sure they will, I actually think they might try to trade up and make a play for Tua. I think there might be some interest there, especially the Bill Belichick, Nick Saban connection. They're really in a best player available situation because they really need help across the board. So I was looking at some of the options available. Obviously, Jordan Love, the quarterback, is sitting there at 23, but at that point, I think the Patriots, if they're not going to get Tua that high, the name I'm looking at, though, I think I'm going to pick Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma, the outside linebacker, also can play on the inside. Seems like a quintessential Bill Belichick type player. Reading up on who he is, a tackling machine. He's a great blitzer. He's good in zone coverage. Frankly, it sounds a lot like Kyle Van Noy, who the Patriots just lost. Their only real linebacker right now, a starting linebacker, is Dante Hightower. He's in the last year of his deal, and he probably doesn't have too much left in the NFL as well. So the Patriots definitely need a linebacker. And so Kenneth Murray, you can plug and play him right away. You don't have to worry about him learning too much of a playbook or anything.
Do you think the Patriots could get comfortable with Jarrett Stidham?
So that's the thing. Stidham is a big unknown. And even if the Patriots do love him, which I think they do generally like what he provided in his rookie season, but he's still a fourth-round pick who's thrown 4 NFL passes. So there's no way that Bill Belichick is just handing him the job. But I think they have to bring in some real competition. And again, I would love to see them go make a play for Tua. If you're going to get a quarterback, why not get the best one as long as you don't have to give up too much to go get him?
Amy Just from NOLA.com. The Saints are another team that will eventually be moving on from a 40-something Hall of Fame-bound quarterback. So what do you see them doing here at 24?
The Saints could go a couple different directions, like picking a wide receiver or a linebacker. But because the Saints picked up Emmanuel Sanders in free agency, I'm going with LSU linebacker Patrick Queen. The Saints have never picked an LSU Tiger in the first round. Not being a homer, I truly think it's a really good pick for them because the Saints have a few question marks at linebacker. So, of course, they're set on the strong side with All-Pro Demario Davis. But weak side starter, Gary Klein is now Buffalo Bill. And at Mike, it's injury roulette. You have Alex Anzalone and Kiko Alonso, who both had pretty bad injuries last year. So they need another linebacker back there, and I think Patrick Queen is a good fit.
Is there the same sort of excitement and energy surrounding the Saints this year, or that's starting to build that we felt last year?
Saints fans were really excited, obviously, about Drew Brees coming back because, yeah, he's the face of the franchise and has been since forever for a lot of people. But when they signed Emmanuel Sanders, it felt like, another just major win.
So we got Patrick Queen and back to Ben, for Ben Gessling for the Vikings.
Corner is a spot of need here. They have done a lot of that in the first round of the past few years, to the point where Mike Zimmer took some flack for it a couple of years ago when they took Mike Hughes' 30th overall pick when they needed offensive line help. But the fact that they got the offensive line help earlier in, a couple of picks ago, they need to replenish that corner group. The pick here for me is Jeff Gladney from TCU. I think he makes a lot of sense both as a guy that can cover outside and inside. He's been a man corner. The Vikings play some man, but they also play a lot of man within zone schemes. A lot of the matchup stuff that pattern matching kind of stuff that a lot of teams do. Whether he plays inside or outside, they need help at both spots, and I think he makes a lot of sense for them here at 25.
We're back for the third time. Omar Kelly at 26. Who are the Dolphins going to take at 26, or who do you like here, Omar?
I think the top 5 offensive tackles are off the board, and even though that is definitely a position I would like to address, with 18, I selected Cesar Ruiz. I think I can firm out the inside of my line and work on the outside later. But with the number 26 pick, I think I'm going to have to go with safety, LSU's Grant Delpit. I think Delpit is an elite athlete who does have that 4.38, 4.40 speed and range. And even though he's not a striker, I think he can play that center field free safety position for the Dolphins.
Bob Condata of the Seattle Times. It always seems like the Seahawks are taking it 27.
Well, yeah.
They always seem to be in this range, 25, 26, 27.
Well, and then they trade down. So ever since 2011, they've traded their first-round pick at some point. So if they actually pick at 27, it'll be a rare thing for them to do. But if they do keep that pick, I think they're going to be looking the defensive line for sure. I don't think anything will be resolved with Jadeveon Clowney by the time the draft comes around. And I think they're still going to be wanting to – they've made a couple incremental moves on their defensive line, but that was the huge weakness for this team last year was their defensive line. And at the moment, it doesn't look better than last year with the Clowney situation still resolved. So I'll go with A.J. Epinesa of Iowa. Sort of almost the exact same kind of player they had last year when they took L.J. Collier. They like their lineman who can sort of play outside and inside, and he sort of seems like that kind of guy who could help him out immediately.
Does this feel like another trade down year for him?
It could, because at the moment they only have 7 picks. In part, they just traded a 5th rounder to Washington for Quentin Dunbar, so that's part of why they've made a lot of trades with picks. Last year they had 4 this time, and they turned it into 11 by the time the draft ended. And so that's what they've sort of always done is just trade down even 3-4 spots and try to get 2 picks somewhere in the 3rd or 4th round.
Jeff Zrebiec from The Athletic, what do you like the Ravens doing?
Well, I think their best case scenario is for either Queen or Murray to be there. I mean, they're inside linebacker is obviously a glamorized position in Baltimore, but right now their depth chart is they've LJ Fort, who kind of is looked at more as a special teamer and really nobody else. One of the main Ravens characteristics in the draft is best player available. I mean, they say it ad nauseum. And I think at this point, even though they don't per se need a day one starting safety right now, I think Xavier McKinney is from Alabama is the best player available. Obviously, we know the Ravens' fondness for Alabama players. They take them all the time. They need a safety. They need more of a third safety, but McKinney kind of fits immediately. McKinney's a legitimate first-round guy, and as usual, the Ravens stick to their board and take the best player available there.
Might they address the Marshall Yanda thing? Is there enough talent in the interior offensive line to do that there?
No, I mean, they need an interior offensive lineman. James Hurst, who's been a valuable backup, got suspended and then cut. Their center is coming off serious knee injury. But I don't know that there's another guy there other than Ruiz, and that's a first rounder. He's already taken.
Paul Kaharski, who he and I were on the Raiders beat at one time together back in the mid-'90s and has been on the Titans forever at The Zone and paulkaharski.com. Who do you like the Titans taking?
There's bad. I was going to take McKinney there, and I was going to turn him into a slot corner, which is the Titans' biggest need with Logan Ryan unsigned and seemingly not coming back. Outside of Clowney, he's probably the biggest player on the market. Doesn't seem like he's heading back. Titans may well be a Clowney landing spot after the draft. Logan Ryan brought this team a ton of stuff. He wasn't the greatest coverage player, championship guy from New England, tackled well, blitzed well, played outside corner also when we're in a jam. I guess I'm going to the next best corner here, who looks to me to be Trevon Diggs. He's played some slot. It's hard to find premier college corners who spend a lot of time in the slot because they're busy playing on the outside, locking people down. He played obviously on offense some, like his brother, who's now in Buffalo as a top wide receiver. So he's got good ball skills, a good sense of where the ball is, and he's going to need some technical refine work. Titans have a new cornerback coach in Anthony Midget, who came from Houston. I could see him getting a first-round pick to work with right out of the gate.
A lot of corners have been taken. Does that mean this is a deep corner draft, or is it just a position of need that you're going to maybe reach on a guy who would be a second rounder just because teams need corners?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think it's a deep corner draft, at least high. And we know it's a tremendous wide receiver draft. So you're going tit for tat there. If everybody's taking good wide receivers, you certainly need good corners to defend those guys. And the Titans, it just works out that they're thin right now at corner, and that's their biggest position of need going into this draft.
We've all talked about how much it's become a passing league. I do think it's a good corner draft. In fact, the last thing the Ravens need is a corner. I mean, they have Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, and they just re-signed Jimmy Smith, and they have their top slot guy, Tavon Young, coming back. So they have 4 corners, and they have two former fourth-round picks that they like behind them. But it still wouldn't shock me if they pick a corner, just because they've been burned so many times by not having enough quality corners late in the season when injuries hit.
The Seahawks have never, under Pete Carroll and John Schneider, have never taken a corner higher than the 3rd round. That's sort of been their MO, is to draft them a little bit later. So this year they really don't need one, having just made the trade for Quentin Dunbar. So there were some mock drafts done a month or two ago. I know I saw some that had Seattle picking a corner, and every time there's one of those, every Seahawk fan rises to point out how they've never taken a corner higher than the 3rd round, and only once higher than the 5th.
Okay, we're in the final stretch here of the Los Angeles Times beat writer mock draft. Pete Dougherty will be making the pick for the Packers from the Green Bay Press-Gazette.
Well, I am really tempted to take Jordan Love, and I wonder what the Packers will do if this comes up and he's still on the board. But I'm going to go Brandon Ayuk, the receiver from Arizona State. They need some explosiveness on offense, and that receiver. And, there'll be good receivers taken later in the draft, and a guy who could end up being better than him. As a prospect, I'm not sure they can find anybody else as explosive as him. So I'm going to go with him.
I've had Jordan Love in my top 10 at places, had him 6 going to the Chargers. Would it surprise you if he were still on the board at this point?
I think it would. I haven't talked to a lot of people, but I've talked to probably 5 scouts about this guy. And I think 4 of them think he's going to go top 20 or 25, but one of them said he thinks he'll be there at the late in the round, and actually said if he were the Packers, he might seriously consider taking him. Somebody higher up is going to fall in love with them, or else trade up to get him would be my best guess.
Matt Barrows from The Athletic. Picking for the 49ers for the second time in this draft.
For the second time, and the first time at pick 13, we picked a defensive tackle, Javon Kinlaw. So defensive tackle and wide receiver are the 2 positions that they lost earlier or last month in March. So we'll go with the wide receiver here, and maybe we get a run on wide receivers towards the end of the round. And I would go with Denzel Mims from Baylor at this spot. He's a big, tall, long arm receiver who also runs like a track star, sub 4.4 40 back in February. Really good with the ball in the air. Sort of has the classic big man's physique and small man's moves. So he's good in space. Just everything that maybe just a slightly lesser version than CeeDee Lamb, the fellow Big 12 wide receiver.
Yeah, what is it that the 49ers, if they were to build the perfect wide receiver for them within reason, what would they be looking for?
Well, Julio Jones. I mean, that's somebody that Kyle Shanahan has worked with in the past. I don't think this guy's quite as fluid as Julio Jones is, but I mean, very physical. You see him block just in the running game, and that's not a big deal, I guess, for receivers. But when he, takes on a DB, that DB stops. That guy either stops in his track or he goes to the ground. I mean, Denzel Mims is a very, very physical wide receiver, and on a team that loves to run the ball like the 49ers do, I think that would be a major asset.
Okay, now we're at the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Nate Taylor from The Athletic. Who do you like the Chiefs taking? I know they need interior offensive line. They need maybe some help at running back. Which way do they go?
I would say that cornerback and linebacker are, I think, the two biggest needs. Earlier in the draft, someone took A.J. Terrell, who I think would work really well with Steve Spagnuolo's system. But since he's not there, I think the Chiefs would probably think to go with a linebacker who may fit their system in terms of playing all three downs. And so I would select Wisconsin's Zach Braun in that discussion, just because I think he has the physical traits to be sort of a thumper in first down situations, but also has enough athleticism and ball skills, and really had an intelligence there towards the second half of the season that makes me think he could be a guy who can play on all three downs.
Zach Braun was a quarterback in high school, like a dual threat quarterback, and I guess you always put your best athletes at that position anyway. But that might give him a little bit of insight on sort of how to think like an offensive player as a defensive player.
Yeah, when you look at the tape, it's not like Zach makes that many mistakes. He's really smart with his decision-making. He can sort of read the quarterback size, much to that you alluded to, Sam. And I just think the Chiefs were one of the real fortunate teams to win a Super Bowl. And, of course, that's always the case. But they never had an injury at the linebacker position. All four guys that they had to play specific roles never got injured and were obviously available during the postseason run. So they lost Reggie Ragland in free agency. He went to Detroit. Ben Neiman is still pretty young as an undrafted guy who's going to enter his third year in the league. Anthony Hitchens is the highest paid linebacker on the team. He's durable and really reliable in terms of a guy who understands Steve Spagnuolo's system. And then the team opted to retain the services of Damian Wilson, who was a guy who plays mostly on first and second down, but is not really available in passing situations. So the Chiefs will probably have to have a similar role on defense if they want to be successful next year, where it's like, hey, don't get hurt, to have a little bit more depth at the linebacker position and try to, continue to build that defense so that it's just as reliable as the Chiefs' potent offense.
Yeah, and it would be really interesting to see him trade down there too. We saw, a lot of times teams want to get that extra year on the contract, on the first contract, so they'll, like Baltimore did, trade in, take Lamar Jackson at the end of the first round and get an extra year on that contract. So that's a coveted spot there at the end of the first round. So, Bill, that wraps it up. We've got 32 picks, and what'd you think?
Well, where was Jordan Love? Why? I can't believe nobody took Jordan Love. Jordan Love is going in the first round of this NFL draft. I guarantee you right now. Have me back on after the real draft. He's going in the first round. I can't believe the Raiders didn't take him. The Raiders went for that cornerback, and with their second pick, the Raiders should have taken him. New England, they don't have a quarterback. They've lost Tom Brady. They didn't take Jordan Love. New Orleans has Drew Brees for one more year. He's already headed out the door to the TV booth.
I think he could be a top 10 pick.
Oh yeah, I'm on record as saying I thought the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, should have taken him as their first pick. I'm stunned, and I think there's one of those things where everyone got caught up in what all the wide receivers went, and everyone thought that's the hot new commodity in the draft, and they forgot about Jordan Love. Guarantee in this league, in this era, quarterback like him is going to go in the first round, probably the top 15 picks. There's no question about that.
You could see a team like Indianapolis trading back into the first round to get him. They just have Phillip Rivers for a year. Pittsburgh at the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career. There's so many teams.
Have you seen Ben Roethlisberger? Have you seen photos of Ben Roethlisberger lately?
Yeah, he looks like Jeremiah Johnson.
He's huge. I think the bigger issue here is, and I love this draft, I love the way you do it, should the NFL even draft? And I'm not talking about the optics or anything like that. I'm talking about, frankly, should the NFL be forcing teams to make $1 million investments on very little information or little less information than they would normally have without time to discuss, do it from home? Should the NFL even, why not delay the draft? The season's going to get delayed, in my opinion. I think every health expert will tell you the season's going to get delayed if it's played at all. Why do you have to force these general managers into these kind of decisions, these weighty decisions, without doing their due diligence. I mean, what's your feeling on that, Sam?
Well, my feeling is because it's a level playing field that everybody has to go back. Everybody always talks about how they rely on the tape. Well, now they have to put their money where their mouth is and rely on the tape. And so maybe that makes it a more interesting draft, and that the true evaluators come out and shine here. And it's not based on a whole number of things beyond what these guys did on tape. And so I think the fact—
Yeah, but a guy like Tua, it's a risk it's needless. It's a needless risk that they had a chance to physically look at him and see him and examine him, and they don't have that chance. Nobody has that chance. So maybe on the opposite side, it's also bad for the kids. Maybe Tua drops. Maybe he loses money because of this.
I think there's
nobody has a chance to see how healthy he is.
Good chance of that. I think there's also a chance Tua could go number 2, that somebody's going to trade up into that number 2 spot.
Oh, I would take it. The kid's a winner. I've seen the pro day stuff, but again, it's a lot to ask these teams to draft. But given everything that's going on, I guess it'll be fun to have this thing as a great diversion. Better than the games of horse on TV right now.
Yeah, well, I'll say there's one team that's pretty comfortable with this format, and that's the Rams. They lose 52nd.
This is the best year for the Rams. They can stock up on those second-round picks. It's the best year for the Rams not to have to make that first-round investment. Absolutely.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Bill. I really appreciate it.
It was a great job.
So that wraps up the Los Angeles Times beat writer mock draft. But before we go, I wanted to check in with Times Rams writer Gary Klein and ask him, Gary, will the Rams ever have a first-round pick?
Sam, it doesn't seem like that the way things have gone since the Rams have been out here. Of course, in 2016, they gave up their first-round picks in the 16 and 17 drafts so they could trade up to get quarterback Jared Goff. In 2018, they had a first-round pick. They gave it up so they could trade for wide receiver Brandon Cooks. In 2019, they traded out of the first round to move back and get more picks. And they don't have a pick this year or next year because of the midseason trade for cornerback Jalen Ramsey. So who knows when they're going to pick in the first round again.
But they do have a couple of second-round picks. What do you see them doing there?
Well, they have the number 52 and 57 pick. That second one coming by trading Cooks to the Houston Texans. So the Rams still have a pressing need as a successor for left tackle Andrew Whitworth. He's going into his 15th season. He's not going to play forever, and the Rams need to find a replacement for him. They also, with the trade of Cooks, have a pressing need for a receiver that can stretch the field and go over the top. So this is a draft that is reportedly very deep in receiver talent. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Rams make a run at a receiver. And of course, you can't put it past general manager Les Snead to trade back in the draft to acquire more picks in the top 104.
That's it for the All 32. And Gary, thank you very much. A decidedly different kind of mock draft in a very different kind of year. For all your NFL needs, go to latimes.com.